Good morning.
Good morning, Suzanne.
Please state your name.
Tommie Douglas Benefield, Jr.
Can you spell those?
Yes, ma'am. Tommie. Middle name Douglas, Douglas. Last name Benefield, Benefield, and Jr.
And what was your relationship to Doug Benefield?
I'm Doug's first cousin.
Okay. How close were you and Doug?
Doug and I were completely attached, connected all the way through his adult life at varying times from daily to semi-annually, certainly quarterly, though a whole entire adult life.
Okay. And how are you employed?
I'm currently employed by a major airline out of Atlanta, Georgia, and I run a flight school or a portion of a flight school in Vero Beach, Florida, 3 days a week. It's a full-time job.
Okay. And were you and Doug close about flying?
Yes, ma'am. He followed me into the Navy. I was a Navy pilot off aircraft carriers, and Doug stayed with me in the months prior to him going into the Navy. He went through aviation officer candidate school, went through flight school, and then flew for 3 years and 2 deployments off aircraft carriers like I did. Same aircraft carrier, USS Nimitz, as a matter of fact.
Okay. How old was Doug Benefield when he died?
All right, he was 5 years younger than me. I'm 68 now. That was 4 years ago. 64. He was 59, I believe.
About how tall was Doug?
5'9", 5'10" at the most.
Approximately how much did he weigh at the time?
My guess is 160, 165. He was slender and fairly small for a man.
Okay. And before Doug moved to Florida, where did he live?
Before he moved.
Before he moved down here to Bradenton, Florida, where did he live?
Okay,
before
I'm
that?
sorry. I had to pick a year at that point. I'm sorry. He had a home all the way up until his death in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, just north of Charleston. 701 Preservation Place was the address.
Okay. And he lived at that address before moving to Bradenton, Florida, correct?
Yes, ma'am. And then he rented the house out when he moved to Bradenton for visitation of their daughter.
Okay. And before he met Ashley, who did he live with at the house?
The house for multiple years was Doug, his longtime wife Renee, and their daughter Eva. That's prior to Renee's death in 2015, December of 2015.
Okay. So Renee died in 2015. Do you know how she died?
Yes, ma'am. She died of a undiagnosed heart ailment, cardiac arrest.
Okay. Is
Hold on.
oh,
It's not qualified. Lack of qualifications,
Yes.
overruled on that basis.
was Renee Eva Benefield's mother?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And I'm sorry, can you say that date again? Was 2015 that she died?
I believe it's December 2nd, but I may have the day off, but not the month of
Okay.
2015.
2015. All right. And I want to ask you now, switch to Ashley. So about how long after Renee died did Doug meet Ashley?
9 months.
Okay. When did you first meet Ashley?
I met Ashley in the spring of 2017. I believe the date was either March 14th or April 14th.
And did you know about Ashley before you met her?
No, ma'am.
Okay. How did your meeting come about?
I was flying for Southwest Airlines as a captain at the time. They changed my schedule like they do many times in the airline world. And I ended up not overnighting in Baltimore, Maryland, and they sent me to Charleston, South Carolina. Because I was going to Charleston, I texted Doug and said, hey, I'll be in to Charleston tonight. I'd like to have dinner. And he said, great. Text.
Sustained.
During your conversations, did he mention the name Ashley?
In the second text chain, which is entered,
Sustained.
I'm asking because,
I can answer the question, ma'am. When I arrived in Charleston, I texted Doug, and his text to me specifically was,
and you can't speak about what Doug said to you,
okay,
but during the text messages, did he indicate to you there was a female involved?
yes, that's the
Okay.
first mention of Ashley to me, that we were not going to have dinner at the airport, and that I was to take Uber up to Mount Pleasant to meet them.
Okay. And was that at their house?
That was at Doug's house, yes, ma'am, 701 Preservation Place.
Doug's house at the time. And how long were you with them, the two of them together?
4 to 5 hours. We started at the house. We ended up going back to my hotel, getting a piece of medical technology, medical device that was a master trainer in that device. We had dinner together at a pizza restaurant across from the hotel, and then went back to my room in the hotel, the three of us, and certainly 4 to 5 hours that day.
And during this time, did you have multiple conversations with both of them?
We had conversations about everything, especially about how they met,
Okay.
starting at the house, ending at the hotel.
And what did Ashley say about how they met?
She talked about how they met at a political event, a meeting, where Doug and his business investors were.
Personal knowledge.
Defendant's statement.
Yeah, overruled.
You can go ahead.
Both Ashley and Doug told me about how they met the first night at a political meeting, how Ashley had reached out to him before that meeting. They showed me text messages between them for the 10 days between the first meeting and her second meeting with him up in Charleston, Mount Pleasant. They talked about how they had mutual interests, mutual alignment, how they were looking for the same thing in a relationship. They talked about, Ashley talked specifically about her fibromyalgia and pain associated with her ballet dancing days. Ashley talked about her mother, her upbringing, about her father, about the separation there.
Okay.
Do you have an objection
Yes, sir.
on the basis?
Hearsay.
It's my
defendant's
understanding this is the defendant's statement.
statement. Yes.
All right, overruled.
Okay. Let me stop you there. So she said that her and Doug met at a political event.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And at the time that you were meeting with them, were they married?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did Ashley indicate to you when they got married or how long they had been married?
Yes, ma'am. 13 days from first meeting.
That they got married 13 days after they met?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did Ashley indicate where they got married?
Yes, ma'am.
And where was that?
That was in Mount Pleasant or Charleston. Doug's best friend at the time, Tripp, married them.
Okay. Did Ashley ever discuss with you that she carried a gun?
Yes.
And what did she say about that?
She said that on their initial meeting, in the political meeting, that she and Doug's traveling partner in business went outside of Secret Service people, and she showed him the gun she was carrying at that event in her bra.
Okay. And she talked to you about this during your meeting?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I want to jump forward a little bit, but did you have any conversations that night about them wanting to have a child? Or was that a different time?
I don't remember us talking about it that first night. No, ma'am.
Okay. Do you remember a conversation with Doug and Ashley, specifically Ashley, about them wanting a child?
I believe it was later in the late spring, the next time that I visited with them.
Okay. And to your knowledge, could Doug have children?
He had a vasectomy after having his daughter with Renee, his longtime wife.
Did Ashley?
I'm sorry, so no, he
Okay.
couldn't have children.
Did Ashley speak about that in front of you, Ashley and Doug together, or Ashley separate about the vasectomy?
They did when they were discussing having Doug have a vasectomy reversal. Yes, ma'am, I believe so.
And to your knowledge, did that reversal ultimately go through?
Yes, ma'am, and I believe Ashley actually paid for it on a credit card. They talked about that.
Okay. And ultimately, she became pregnant.
Yes, 3 months after the vasectomy was reversal, she became pregnant. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did they end up, I'm going to skip a little bit forward now.
Yes, ma'am.
Did they end up having a wedding reception?
They did. I believe it was June of 2017. I was single parenting at the time, and I wasn't able to attend, but it was in Charleston, South Carolina, at the home of one of Doug's business partners.
Okay. You mentioned something about ballet dancing, so I'm going to ask you about that. In your meetings and discussions with Ashley, did she indicate she was interested in the ballet?
She spoke about the fact that she had been a ballet dancer, that she had performed in, I'll call them shows, back, I believe, in Maryland, where she grew up. And by the time that I first met Ashley, they had formed the ballet company called the American National Ballet in Charleston. And they were, at the time that I first met her, they were working on getting that ballet company up and running.
Okay. And was this going to be a large endeavor?
Several $1 million, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Up to 40 dancers were hired. Yes, ma'am, large endeavor.
Okay. And do you know what Doug's role was in that? In your discussions with Ashley, did you find out what Doug's role was?
Yeah, Doug and Ashley talked about it on the first night I met her, about how they founded the ballet, how Doug did the online limited liability corporation work, founded the name, resurrected that name, how they worked together to try to build a ballet that was diverse and open to more than one body size, body shape, body color. That was the philosophy of the ballet as they explained it. That was Ashley's dream.
And how was it funded?
It was funded several ways. A number of Doug's business partner, friends, and Doug himself invested money. They had a major, let's say, arts benefactor in Charleston, is a personal injury lawyer who was going to be the primary major donor. In Doug's case, Doug was working on very advanced technologies and patents at the time. And in his case, he didn't have any savings or cash in the bank. So he sold his future stock grants and options to other investors to put his own money in, about $100,000 in his case.
So while this ballet was in development or launching, did Ashley ultimately become pregnant? I know you said she became pregnant several months later, but I'm just trying to get a timeline.
Yes, ma'am. So in February of 2017 are the records and what they told me about founding it. I met her in maybe a month or two after that on that Charleston overnight. They held the first ballet event, and I was invited in May of 2017. Once again, single parent, I wasn't able to attend. She got pregnant in July, and we talked about that multiple times. And the next month in August was the large launch, which me, my business partners, my veteran friends, supporters of Doug all went to Charleston for that major launch in August. It was at a place, I'm sorry.
And at that time, was Ashley pregnant in August?
She was pregnant. I don't remember if she knew or not. It was
Okay.
1 month after the pregnancy was Emerson was conceived.
And at some point, did Ashley move away from the South Carolina home?
Yes, ma'am. We had the August ballet big launch. 2 weeks later, Doug moved Ashley down to Ashley's mother's home in Lakewood Ranch. Drove down one day, dropped her off, and drove back the next day. That's late August.
And what was the understanding, what was Ashley's understanding of why she was moving and what was going on?
In text conversations and personal conversations with Ashley,
Defendant's statement.
It's going to be the defendant's statements.
Can we approach her?
Yes.
Person or on the telephone. Did she indicate to you that she was going to Florida because she was sick? And
that was the initial indication. Yes, ma'am.
and her mother could better take care of her?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Throughout the time that you saw Doug and Ashley together, how did Doug act?
In particular on the opening night and all the way through their relationship. Opening night, totally in love, both of them in love with each other. Doug was always very respectful. He was very, very respectful with her in front of me, both that initial night and then the next weekend, I believe in May, that I spent down in Sarasota, Bradenton with them. Every time he was respectful of her. They were in love. They never showed anything in front of me other than caring for each other.
That was going to be my next question. So did you see anything other than that?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross. Mr. Taylor, as I've said before, you're free to use the podium if you prefer to cross from table. Yes, sir.
Morning, Mr. Benefield.
Good morning, Mr. Taylor.
You were a naval pilot, correct?
Navy pilot, yes, sir.
I think you mentioned the training that you had briefly, correct?
I went through extensive training all my 30-year career, yes, sir.
Okay. Some of that training included close quarters combat, did it not?
No, sir, never.
No hand-to-hand
No, sir.
training at all?
No, sir.
Do you remember having a conversation where you related information about close quarters combat?
Yes, sir. I was in charge. I was the senior.
Do you remember that conversation
Which one, sir? I don't know which one
about
you're
close
speaking
quarters combat?
If it was in perspective of me running security and self-defense training for my airline, not the Navy.
You received no such training in the Navy.
No, sir, never.
Did Doug admit to you firing the gun in the kitchen of their home?
Can we approach?
Yes.